Foster, welcome to our
Thank,
little program here today.
thanks for
It
having
is
me.
it's great to have you. We've got a lot to cover. Half an hour is going to fly by. I'm warning you right now because it's that much fun to talk about all this good stuff. But first, a little intro. Who are you and what are you doing these days?
I am Foster Sayers, and I am Senior Vice President of Legal for symplr Software, which is a leading healthcare IT company. I've been here for just under 3 years, and my focus is primarily on the commercial contracting function, where I manage legal operations and also support all of the commercial contracting.
Love all those things. Legal ops and contracting. That was my favorite magical combination when I was in house. But you and I met when you were inside of a legal tech company or a contract automation company or CLM company. I don't know what they like to be called, but you were in Permata in house for a little bit there. Tell us about what you did there, and then maybe I don't know. Maybe we'll start there with some reflections on what was happening in the market at that time, and then we'll talk about what we're seeing today. What was your job like at Permata? What were you doing there?
So there, I had two jobs. So I was general counsel and also chief evangelist. And I had joined after being a longtime customer of Pramada at a company called Vertifor, which was private equity backed. And yeah, it seemed like a good opportunity. And when you find out like that ampersand is like it's for real, like you have two jobs, that it can be a lot. But also, it was a really exciting time because that was when AI was like just coming on the scene, and ultimately I was more excited about like going back and like working on that. And in fact, like I'm a customer of Pramada again and use it here at symplr, and so it was pretty cool because everything that I had kind of like directed strategy wise for like product development, I then got to like implement, which was
Right.
pretty cool.
Which is great. So yeah, and this is part of kind of my I don't know, soapbox, my sensitive topic point on a lot of the legal tech companies who don't have that domain in house inside, and they're building solutions with some of the best engineers and engineering, but still kind of are missing that nuance that really only comes from living it and breathing it. But you tell thoughts on that because it sounds like you were, as you said, were trying to direct strategy for the product when you were inside one of the products, right?
Yeah. And that is, yeah, you can't overstate that enough, that a lot of folks just don't appreciate the day in the life. And it's like pretty obvious, right? When you talk to folks, right? Because they're like, and here's a use case, and then you're like, that I would never use, you
Right,
know?
right.
Um, it's like when I like AI, right? That's obviously everybody is getting pitched on the AI features and functionality. And that was something where, you know, I I really felt like this could be super powerful, but you need to be like really intentional about how you kind of think it through. And so one of the things that I feel like a lot of people kind of over index to is like, one, just kind of these imagined use cases, but two, they over index to like, what is this going to do for legal? And the way that I've kind of approached implementing AI at symplr has been more about like, what is this going to do for the enterprise so that legal does not have to do it for them? And so a lot of my focus has been like, I will build an AI agent to basically answer a question or support some other user, some other department, whether they're in finance or product or support or sales or success, so that they can understand what they want to about a contract without opening a ticket for legal, waiting for legal to respond, and kind of going from there. And that strategy's worked great. Um, I got business partner of the year, and I got to go on a cool trip to Cabo with the top salespeople. I can't promise that will happen for everybody, but but I do think if you take a moment and you're like, this is more than just like, don't just think about like, I need a redlining tool with AI. Like, okay,
Yeah.
maybe you do, but like, there is so much more meaningful and impactful things that you can do with AI. And if you make it more about the enterprise than just like you yourself in legal, I think you'll find that one, like you'll be a lot more successful. But two, like if it's a budget concern, right, then I think that makes a more compelling story to get your business to want to invest in your solution, understanding how it's going to be impactful and meaningful for departments beyond just yours.
I love so much about everything what you're saying, and I think that gets overlooked quite a bit. We talk about legal tech so much, legal tech, legal tech. I think it kind of highlights what's been an issue in house for years before tech as well, is forgetting that we're business partners, that we're business enablers. You are landing this point beautifully. So let me double click on this. I hear a lot of concern from the legal folks. They can't trust the business. They can't trust them to fill out a template. They can't trust them to read any of their FAQs. Back in the day when we still had to read and not chat with our FAQs. So I just had this conversation with another in-house lawyer where I was poking at this. Really, do we still have lawyers who want to review every single NDA? Like, really? And I have very strong opinions about it. He's like, well, I'm going to push back a little because I'll be able to review every single one because I'll be so much faster using AI. And this is a forward-thinking, modern in-house lawyer who still, so I always combine the two together. Like if you're a modern lawyer, you're going to have to assume smart risks, let go of a bunch of contracts, and love tech and bring in tech. And I feel like I learned a really cool lesson. I was like, well, you know what? If you bring in enough tech, have at it. Review everything you want because now you should be doing it in a fraction of the time. I'd love to hear your thoughts on, enabling the business and assuming risk that they just aren't going to do what you told them to do versus, well, now I could just do it for them like I've always wanted to, but I can and use tech to be faster. Is it some sweet combination between those somewhere? Where do you land on that spectrum?
I definitely am a big proponent of self-service. And I had that problem when I joined symplr where legal was the origin point for every single contract. And they're like, oh, well, we don't know if they'll get the template right. And I was like, well, then let's design like a workflow so that they are positioned to get it right and automate the generation of that document. Because,
Right.
I always like am shocked when people are like, oh, just send out pre-signed NDAs. I'm like, then how do you know who you have NDA obligations with? Like that's not a good paradigm, right? But I get it, right? You don't want to spend a ton of time on it. So that was something that I one of the first things I did was automate the generation so that it can go out, the person can send it out. It can come back signed. If not, like there's a case that gets associated with that document that someone created so that if it does come back in red lines, then you can do that if you choose to do that. But yeah, I think I am one to tend to err on the side of like, let's empower people and support the business and like, let's just get things done. Right. I'm all too aware of how quickly legal can become a bottleneck. Right. And I think that is really kind of like first and foremost, like where people should be thinking when they are wanting to implement legal tech is like, how does this make legal less of a bottleneck? Because let's face it, like that's a natural tendency for legal to go. And in some cases, the business will over rely on legal because they often are like very competent, right? And very, good workers and, diligent in their work. But at the same time, right, we need to make sure like the value of their work is what it should be. And so I'm always one to say like, yeah, like let's just automate it. And also like, I just believe that making mistakes are just fundamental to learning. And if we want to like bring people up, we can't we can't expect them to improve and get better if we never give them any chance to make mistakes because we're so controlling over like the whole process, right? And so I'm much more willing to be like, yeah, like this one person messed it up, but like 100 people got it right, and that was 100 times that we were not like middlemaning it and being a bottleneck. So that's kind of how I think about it.
Yeah. Well, and I think that of course, I love that approach of yes, can we not focus on the one that slipped through the cracks? And yes, there's risk to that. And I think for, the immediate reaction and response to me, which is a very easy one for any lawyer to throw out, but that could be the one that cost us all the fines and $4 billion in the EU. And I remember back in the HIPAA, when that first came out and I was constantly receiving the same pushback. I just want to say it's so easy to throw that wrench in. It's so easy to say, well, but this could be the one. okay, then that's going to stop everything. If we're constantly solving for that one, then business can't get done. And I think there's just this continuous gap between understanding risk tolerance for the company and the lawyer's job to identify every single risk. And I think those conversations are super important between the law department leaders and the C-suite, the rest of the C-suite, the CFO, the CEO. Everybody's got a little skin in this game. That's if that's known to everybody, they should
Right.
all have a little skin in the risk game.
I mean, yeah, and like illegal, I mean, our core function, right, is managing risk. And so that's one of those things where I'm like, okay, so someone makes a mistake, like, do we lose our shirt, or is it just going to be like an annoying thing that we have to go and like fix, and like we're going to have to draft an amendment or whatever? Like,
Right.
okay, fine. Like, I would, if we're not going to lose our shirt over it, then I'm much more willing to say like, hey, let's give it a shot, let's try it, let's see if it works. And maybe it only addresses like 80% of like our cases, but like the 80-20 rule, like I would rather have 80% than zero, right?
That's right.
And I think that a lot of times people are just like, oh, but this could fail. I'm like, but nothing's succeeding if we're
That's
not trying it out.
right. Right. It is. It's just, it kind of becomes a little bit tiring of having the same whole, like, why am I always in the job of convincing? But hey, welcome to legal ops and innovation, right? I mean, you kind of are in that job all the time. Okay. So,
Right.
so you were brought into this role. Was that intentional that you were going to head up operation legal ops as well? Did they know that, or did you kind of bring that in?
So I came into this role because the CEO at the time I had worked with when I was at Vertifor, where he was chief revenue officer, and there was just no like intentional focus on legal operations. Like
Right.
the staff just did not have the bandwidth because they were just living without good legal tech solutions. And you know what it's like you're just on the hamster wheel running as hard as you can.
Doing.
And so
Yep. Yep.
they knew that they needed someone who would be like laser focused on standing up these kind of systems, right? To get people to stop doing certain things, like being able to do certain things more efficiently. And so like my actual title when I first joined was VP of Legal Operations. And
Okay.
then after about a year and a half, it expanded for me to take over the management of the commercial contracting team, in which case my role changed to VP of Legal. And then actually just a couple weeks ago, I was promoted to Senior Vice President of Legal. But the focus was to have me run legal operations because they just had that moment, which every company does, hopefully at some point, which is like, if we're not intentional about legal operations, then legal will always be a bottleneck.
Yep. Yep. I love that legal ops came first, which is super, super cool and
I love
unusual.
that too,
Yeah.
because by coming in and only being focused on that, I was able to get so much done. It
Yeah.
was great that I love my boss, our chief legal officer, that he like appreciated that, like, if he gave me all this other stuff, like it would just be a distraction, and that he really needed me to have like the full allocation of my bandwidth to tackling the legal operations side of things so that I could
Sure.
just kind of be a one-man army to implement everything that I did.
Okay, well, one man army. So let's talk about that for a bit, because a lot of legal ops folks find themselves feeling that. And legal ops is defined so differently in so many places. I lived it myself. Learned that and know that. So what was your top focus for for those who are more generalists? And I'll deviate from contracts for a minute, but I'd love to know what was the top focus or the mandate when you were brought in to lead legal ops?
So at that point, we had a good repository solution, which I appreciated, right? Because I think a lot of people start with intake, and then they're still having their business disappointed that it takes forever to find contracts, and like they're still in that kind of trap.
So you're talking about contracts, though. So for legal, when you came in for legal ops, was it legal ops of contracting, or was there a broader remit of legal law department operations?
It was really focused on the contracting side of
Okay.
things, um,
Okay.
and how we kind of do well, really like all commercial contracts and basically commercial matter
Commercial
management,
operation.
right?
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay.
So everything that had a nexus with our commercial function,
Okay.
we just had an inbox, right?
Yep.
An inbox, and then we had like the cases in Salesforce. And the problem there was they used the case functionality for a bunch of departments, and it was so like genericized that it always caused a bunch of back and forth between
Yep.
legal and the requester after it was created. And the problem was that because you have like one team supporting all these other departments with that case functionality, like if you needed an enhancement to be like, can you just add this pick list value? Can you just add these fields? No bandwidth, right? And
That's right.
so they were just kind of stuck because they had a really insufficient tool for intake that, you know, it just lended itself to bottlenecks because you could never get oriented to the problem fully when that
Right.
case came in. And so that was where I immediately started looking at like, how do I put workflows in place that are going to like basically use conditional logic so that we're making sure that people answer what they need to, but not what they don't. So that we can just, also making auto assignments. That was another problem, is that these cases, like my director of contracts who reports to me, like she had to manually assign each one out and was just
Yeah.
spending like half her day doing
Yeah.
that, which was not a good use of her time. Like she was way too valuable for us to like have her in that position. So we didn't have any automation around assignments. We had a terrible intake process. Um, we also were in this trap where we didn't have any terms online. And so like, even if a deal wasn't going to close, legal still had to draft this master agreement for this
Right.
deal. Right. And so of course, with all of that on them, how could you not be a bottleneck? And so that was where in my first 30 days, I put all of our terms online so that we could get out of that trap. And then I created some automations so that like we didn't have to draft every NDA, we didn't have to draft every MSLA,
Yeah.
and just started kind of working there. And yeah, just
I love that. So it was really like this focused CLM operations, little c, little l, little m. I'm not talking about tools, but like truly contract lifecycle management and operationalizing it. I love that that was such a specific focus. I think contracting operations gets lobbed on to legal operations generalists. So they're dealing with law firm spend problems. They're dealing with training and professional development and growth of the law department employees. They're their chief of staff to the GCO or GC or CLO. It's like a million things. And then they're like, oh yeah, can you also fix contracting? That tail's going to wag the dog real fast. That's a beast. I mean, it's a full-time job. Clearly,
yeah.
that's what you were
Well,
came in
yeah.
to do. Right.
I mean, my title could have been like VP of contract ops, but it's just not like a
Right.
thing so much. But like really, that's what the business recognized was like the crucial thing that we needed, because
Yes.
when you don't have any good systems around your contracting function, it's just chaos.
Yes. Yeah, 100%. And now, Foster, let's dig into the definition of systems, because what I heard you did a whole bunch of good, smart process stuff. Amen. God bless. Right. So the fact that that the company was Frankensteining Salesforce into doing things it shouldn't be, we see that all the time. But you didn't just tackle the tool. You're like, hey, we should put some terms online. And that's a very substantive decision. So being a lawyer, did that help you kind of push that? Because you
Oh,
know,
for
not
sure.
anybody can do that, right? Somebody can come in and say that that's a pretty obvious thing to do, but then the lawyers, wow, I don't know, I don't, there's a lot of resistance. So tell me about like the big picture of all the things that you tackled. It wasn't just the tools.
Right. So, and that is an important one. And I think a lot of folks also, they don't put terms online because they don't necessarily know like the best practice, right? And so one of the things that I learned, because we're a company that's grown by acquisition, and so we have got a lot of like solution specific terms, right?
Yeah.
And what I knew would be a trap would be for us to put terms online and have a subdomain for each of these different kind of like sets of terms. And so what I did was I was like, no, we're gonna have one URL that we put everything on, because then you don't fall into that trap of maintenance, right? Where it's like, oh, well, on this quote in order
Yeah.
form, we got to put this URL, and on this quote in order form, we got to push this. Like, it's a trap. You got to just do one. And then further, you also need to appreciate that you don't just put the terms in like text on HTML, right? Because you could have transcription errors, right? With whoever, the person who is putting it in online. What you do is you deploy them as a PDF, and you just have a link to a PDF for every kind of different term. So like, here's our link to our master. Here's our link to these solution terms. Here's our link to our information security agreement, right? And you bucket them out as PDFs, because also when you do need to do an update, one, like you have control over that, and all you do is take your PDF, you send it to your webmaster, and they can swap it out in seconds, right? And I think when people have not, unfortunately, I'd done a term site before, so I knew those best practices and I had learned that. And, it is kind of like intimidating if you don't know what to do. And I think like some people question the merit of it, but others, I think, just are resistant because they just haven't thought it through and aren't quite sure how to execute on that. The thing is, though, it is a really valuable thing to do because, I'm an attorney, but I scroll to the bottom until I get to the checkbox and I click and then I install my app, right? Because like if you want to use the app, you have to agree to the terms.
100%.
And so like that behavior, like that spills over into the commercial world. And like if they're only spending a couple $1,000s on that particular solution, it's not one of your really high value ones, then like they're like, yeah, fine. Like
that's right.
Right.
So what I'm hearing is smart risk taking. I mean, that's the thing. That still at the end of the day, you're approaching this in such a pragmatic way that really just asks the question of, so what's the worst thing that'll happen, or more importantly, how does this really reflect to business? How does this work in real life? Because I think we get caught up in theory and hypothesis.
Oh my gosh, yes, like
right.
So many people are so fixated on the downside that they rob themselves the chance of experiencing the upside, and it's like, yeah, like horrible things happen every day. And that's just the way of the world. But amazing, awesome things happen too. But the only way that those amazing, awesome things happen is like with great intention and thoughtfulness and saying like, hey, like we know that these risks are there. So what we can do is just have a plan to manage them. So like if that risk does manifest, what do we do? And have like thought around that, right? Like I said, I'm not going to risk the business losing its shirt, but if it's like, oh, we didn't get quite the correct terms in place, okay, well then now let's just do the amendment and fix it, right? Like, like I think that, and then also, right, if somebody makes that mistake, they probably won't make it again. But if they never make that mistake, then you've really like put a ceiling on their learning and how competent they can actually become, because they're in this spot where they're kind of like, it's like you're a baby. You can't, we have to like put all the like, soccer protectors and stuff. And I'm like, but at the end of the day, like if we were in business, right, like you should expect people to have like a baseline level of maturity, and that most people, right, if you extend trust, will honor that trust by like conducting themselves accordingly, right? And then, yeah, like I think also people have to think about things as like experiments, right? And like when I implement legal tech, I'm very much one to take like kind of the lean agile mindset of like, what's my MVP? Like, what's my minimum viable product? Like, what's the thing that I can ship like today that people can start using, find valuable, and then give me feedback? Like, oh, could you add a field for this? Or could it also like address this scenario, right? And then I start to iterate, right? And I start to improve and I start to build, because so many people are like, we have to create this whole master plan that accounts for every single thing. And it's like, look, like, a lot of those plans go out the door once you get started, right? So the main thing, right, is to like come up with something actionable that you can get started on, because so many things just die on the vine. Like they never get out of the gate because you spend all this time like working through like all these worst case scenarios that like you just deny yourself a chance to get to the best case. And I think people just need to be like, let's think about this as an experiment, and let's say like, here's what we think we'll achieve, and then let's try it, right? And I think, small experiments are better than big ones, right? Because you can learn a lot and you can get things right when you do want to do it at scale.
And it sounds like you need to have the right corporate culture, obviously in support of your leadership. And once that safety net is there, I think that's part of the word experimentation doesn't sit well with everybody. I love it. But you have to, some experiments fail. So you need to have that, you have to have that right company culture. For sure.
Yeah, I did, when I did my like full rollout of the intake solution that would replace the case management function in Salesforce, I did it as a pilot with a cohort that was a subset of the sales team, and just with like that sales leader and their sales team, because I was like, this will be how I learn if I'm getting it right. Like, do I have the right workflows in place? Do I have the right, things set up, the right integrations, and so on and so forth? And then when I was successful with them, that then made it not just me advocating it, but everybody on that team was like, we got to move everybody onto this new solution because it's way better than just using the
Yeah.
case object. It's way more effective. It's much better. We like it a lot more, right? And now they're the ones who are like championing it, and then, giving me that impetus to go from like pilot to just rolling it out across the enterprise.
Which is a super pragmatic and very much a best practice that we are always explaining. Do not go for the big bang approach. Those are rarely, if ever, successful. You said it perfectly, Foster. You do a pilot first with a known player, known stakeholder who'll have your back. You'll work together to get rid of the kinks together, and then you've won a champion. And then it starts to roll. I love that. That is such an easy way to tackle it. If people could just step back and say, it's okay, you don't have to go big bang, but they're feeling so much pressure, right? And they go through this whole selection and tech assessment project and everything takes months, that then they still feel like we got to light it up for more than just one group. And I always say, don't just start small. So we have a couple of minutes left. I really want to get your thoughts on, or your direct, guidance, hands-on today. How are you using AI? For what? Give people some ideas. What's working and what's not for you in your day job?
I'm using AI for like all the things pretty much.
Great.
And what's interesting is I feel like in legal tech, there is so much focus on like AI tools for redlining. And that's actually like the last thing that I got to, where I put my focus first and foremost was like, how can I leverage AI so that people aren't relying on legal for every single thing? Like nobody wants to be a corporate librarian, and people have questions about contracts all the time. And so what I did was I thought, like, what are the questions we get the most? And then let me build an agent so that someone can push that button and it'll be like, okay, here's this agent tells me like the customer's uplift terms and when their next renewal is. This agent gives me a product dashboard so I can visually see the products that are talked about in this contract.
Because I'm going to stop you because that already sounds pretty savvy for most of the people who I speak with, and maybe those who are listening. So how does Foster build an agent, and where? Give them some, like, what if I want to build an FAQ agent, just like you basically just described? Where would somebody start?
I'm a big fan of Anthropic and Claude.
Okay.
Pramada, which we use, has an integration with Anthropic so that it makes it pretty easy. But folks that want to use like Claude Co-working could do this. And, I would say that one of the things to be thoughtful about is to make sure that you have like that direct integration with your contract management database, because you want to basically use it as like a constitutional AI, which is like only answer me from like this set of documents, right? Because context is king in everything that you do with AI, right? And so you need to make sure that you are having a very good context that you're deploying that agent on. But once you do, running those agents like within your contract database, and look, like the better the data in your contracts database, the better and more effective your agents are going to be. So like, don't neglect the fact that you need to invest in bringing up your systems that maintain and manage your contracts to really optimize and fully realize the full benefits of layering AI on top of that.
Yeah, that continues to be the garbage in, garbage out. We've been saying it for 25 years. It doesn't matter what the technology is. Same thing with, you got to get your processes right before you automate. Wah, boring. I said it again this morning on another webinar. I'm like, guys, I'm sorry. It's super boring, but it's so true. I don't know if it's truer now than ever because people are expecting magic from AI. They're going, you didn't tell it what to read. You didn't tell it where to look. It's going out to the Edgar Million documents database that everybody's so proud of. All the LLMs are so proud of all the things they've trained it on. But the in-house user is the first one to go, I don't care. I don't care what Enron did in its millions of dead contracts. I needed to look at my stuff. And then you got to hold up a mirror. Well, where is your stuff? Oh, it's on my C drive. Is that not okay? So
you're totally right, Lucy. I mean, the things that were foundational 20 years ago are foundational today, and likely even like more important with AI, because anyone who has like worked with it knows that it really relies so much on the context that you give it. And the only way that you can really do that effectively is to have put in that work to make sure that you have like an existing framework that you're plugging it into where it can navigate and give you the answers. Or like in this case, right, I don't want to answer myself. I want someone to get the answer from someone other than me or my team. And the only way that I can do that with like accuracy is to know that I have done the work to have the solid foundation that is the context that it's operating off of, that so that I can have the confidence that it's not giving bad information out. And that's something that people have to be prepared to put in the work for. It's not just as simple as, oh, and I came up with some prompts today. I'm like, a lot of legwork that goes into being super successful with that.
Yes, Foster, on that note, we're at time, which is amazing how fast these things always go. But I think your public service announcement at the end is the best thing to close it on. It still takes the pre-work. The readiness still has to be there. You can't just light up a tool and expect perfect or even high quality answers at this moment, right? You still have to, you gotta teach it things. And I think that's still, that's a tough reality. No, people don't want to hear, perhaps. So
yeah, there's no magic bullets with AI, and yeah, you just have to be real about the work that goes into getting yourself the foundation and make sure that you're willing to do that. Because if you're not, like, you're just going to be dissatisfied with whatever you implement.
I love it. We wrote a whole series of articles called Foundation Before Automation. So I didn't pay you, Foster, and I really appreciate that. And really nice PSA. So thank you again. Really appreciate it. And we're going to have to do another one because there's so much more to talk about. Have a fantastic weekend and a happy rest of your Friday.
All right. Thanks, Lucy. Take care.